Imagine a place where you can ski in the mountains in the morning and surf the Pacific Ocean in the afternoon, where temperatures range from 134 degrees Fahrenheit in Death Valley, the hottest ever recorded on Earth, to sub-zero alpine winters in the Sierra Nevada, where fault lines crack open the earth with terrifying violence, where wildfires consume entire forests in hours, where droughts last years and floods reshape valleys overnight. This is California, 163,696 square miles of geological chaos, ecological extremes, and human ambition on a scale that defies comprehension. But 13,000 years before Spanish conquistadors named it after a mythical island of warrior women, before gold fever brought hundreds of thousands racing across continents, before Hollywood projected fantasies worldwide and Silicon Valley rewired human civilizations, this land belonged to peoples who understood its rhythms, respected its power, and built societies of remarkable sophistication. Around 11,000 BCE, the first Californians crossed into a paradise. As Ice Age glaciers retreated, they left behind a landscape of stunning diversity: coastal redwood forests where trees grew over 300 feet tall, the largest living things on Earth; fertile valleys flanked by mountain ranges; deserts where life clung to existence with fierce determination; and a coastline stretching 840 miles along the Pacific. These Paleo-Indians hunted megafauna mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, with Clovis points so precisely crafted that archaeologists marvel at the skill required. When the great mammals vanished around 8000 BCE, California's peoples didn't collapse, they adapted, developing one of the most diverse and successful hunter-gatherer cultures in human history. By 3000 BCE, California supported an estimated 300,000 indigenous people organized into over 100 distinct tribes, speaking languages from 6 different language families, more linguistic diversity than all of Europe compressed into a single region. This wasn't random tribalism, but the product of California's extreme ecological diversity. Each environment demanded specialized knowledge, and that knowledge produced distinct cultures. The Chumash of the southern coast built plank canoes called tumals using techniques so sophisticated that modern naval architects study them. These weren't crude dugouts but engineered vessels, planks cut from driftwood, drilled with stone tools, sewn together with plant fiber cordage, and sealed with naturally occurring tar from coastal oil seeps. Chumash mariners navigated 20 miles of open ocean to the Channel Islands, harvesting fish, shellfish, and sea mammals, establishing trading networks that moved goods up and down the coast. The Ohlone peoples around San Francisco Bay developed landscape management through controlled burning that astounded later Spanish observers. They set fires in late summer and fall, creating a mosaic of habitats: grasslands that attracted elk and deer, cleared understory and oak groves that increased acorn production, and firebreaks that prevented catastrophic wildfires. Spanish missionaries arriving in the 1770s described California as a park-like paradise, never realizing this landscape was human-engineered, the product of millennia of careful management. In the north, the Yurok, Carrick, and Hooper built elaborate societies centered on salmon. They constructed sophisticated fish weirs, underwater fences woven from willow branches that channeled salmon into traps during spawning runs, so abundant that Spanish explorers reported you could walk across rivers on the backs of fish. These northern peoples developed complex legal systems, property rights, and wealth accumulation based on dentalia shells, white tusk shells harvested from deep waters off Vancouver Island and traded down the coast, serving as currency. A Yurok man's status was measured precisely in strings of dentalia shells, and elaborate laws governed everything from marriage to fishing rights to compensation for insults. Across California, acorns formed the dietary foundation. This required extraordinary labor, gathering acorns each fall, shelling them, grinding them with stone mortar and pestle. Some grinding sites show depressions 3 feet deep worn into bedrock from centuries of use, and then leaching out bitter tannins through elaborate water filtering processes that could take days. California's indigenous peoples weren't waiting for history to begin. They were history living, building, creating, trading, worshipping, fighting, and thriving in complex societies with their own philosophies, art forms, legal systems, and cosmologies. The Kuksu religion of Central California featured elaborate dance ceremonies and specially built roundhouses where masked dancers representing spirits instructed initiates in creation stories and moral codes. The Toloch cult of Southern California used Torah plant-based hallucinogens in coming-of-age ceremonies that connected adolescents to the spirit world. These weren't primitive superstitions but sophisticated religious systems as complex as anything in Europe or Asia. Then came the ships. On September 28, 1542, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo sailed into San Diego Bay commanding 2 ships under Spanish flag, becoming the first European to reach California. Cabrillo described friendly native peoples eager to trade, abundant resources, and good harbors. He claimed California for Spain and continued north, mapping the coast before dying from an infection after falling on rocks at San Miguel Island. His expedition returned to Mexico having found no gold, no wealthy cities, nothing Spain valued. California was dismissed as a barren coast too far from anything that mattered. For over 2 centuries, Spain ignored it. Sir Francis Drake changed the equation briefly. In 1579, while raiding Spanish shipping along the Pacific coast, Drake landed somewhere near Point Reyes. The exact location remains debated, claimed Nova Albion for England, and sailed away. Neither Spain nor England followed up with settlement. California remained overwhelmingly indigenous country while European diseases, weapons, and colonization devastated the rest of the Americas. But Spain's neglect couldn't last. In the 1760s, rumors reached Mexico City that Russian fur traders were pushing south from Alaska, establishing outposts, and claiming territory. Simultaneously, the British were probing the Pacific coast. Spain's entire northern frontier and the lucrative silver mines of Zacatecas were suddenly vulnerable. The Sacred Expedition of 1769 changed everything. Spurred by José de Galvez, the Inspector General of New Spain, Spain launched a coordinated land and sea expedition to colonize Alta California. Military commander Gaspar de Portela and Franciscan priest Junipero Serra led the effort, establishing a presidio and mission at San Diego. On July 16, 1769, the first permanent European settlement in California. Over the next 53 years, Spain established a chain of 21 Franciscan missions, stretching from San Diego to Sonoma, each a day's journey apart, connected by El Camino Real, the Royal Road. For Presidio San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and San Francisco provided military protection. Tres Pueblos San Jose, Los Angeles, and Branciforte were civilian settlements meant to supply the missions. The mission system was both spiritual enterprise and economic exploitation. Franciscan priests sought to convert indigenous peoples to Catholicism while training them in European agriculture, crafts, and language, the theory being that Indians would become Christian, Spanish-speaking subjects of the crown. The reality was darker. Once indigenous people accepted baptism and became neophytes, they were forbidden to leave mission grounds. Those who fled were hunted down by soldiers and returned in chains. Families were separated. Men and unmarried women slept in segregated dormitories locked at night. Traditional religious practices were banned and punished with whipping. European diseases, measles, smallpox, syphilis, dysentery tore through mission populations with apocalyptic fury. At Mission Dolores in San Francisco, deaths outnumbered births every single year of its existence. Between 1769 and 1821, California's indigenous population crashed from approximately 300,000 to perhaps 200,000, with mission Indians suffering the worst mortality. Yet Father Junipero Serra, who personally founded 9 missions and oversaw the system until his death in 1784, is remembered differently by different communities. The Catholic Church canonized him in 2015 as a saint who brought Christianity and civilization. Many indigenous Californians see him as the architect of genocide, a man whose missions were concentration camps where their ancestors died in shocking numbers. The truth resists simplification. Serra genuinely believed he was saving souls, yet his letters revealed he requested and received permission to use corporal punishment, and he demanded soldiers hunt down runaways. The missions produced wine, wheat, and livestock while destroying cultures. They taught European trades while obliterating indigenous knowledge systems. They baptized thousands while burying tens of thousands. California's indigenous peoples weren't waiting for history to begin. They were history living, building, creating, trading, worshipping, fighting, and thriving in complex societies with their own philosophies, art forms, legal systems, and cosmologies. The Kuksu religion of Central California featured elaborate dance ceremonies in specially built roundhouses where masked dancers representing spirits instructed initiates in creation stories and moral codes. The Toloch cult of Southern California used Torah plant-based hallucinogens in coming-of-age ceremonies that connected adolescents to the spirit world. These weren't primitive superstitions but sophisticated religious systems as complex as anything in Europe or Asia. Then came the ships. On September 28, 1542, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo sailed into San Diego Bay commanding 2 ships under Spanish flag, becoming the first European to reach California. Cabrillo described friendly native peoples eager to trade, abundant resources, and good harbors. He claimed California for Spain and continued north, mapping the coast before dying from an infection after falling on rocks at San Miguel Island. His expedition returned to Mexico having found no gold, no wealthy cities, nothing Spain valued. California was dismissed as a barren coast too far from anything that mattered. For over 2 centuries, Spain ignored it. Sir Francis Drake changed the equation briefly. In 1579, while raiding Spanish shipping along the Pacific coast, Drake landed somewhere near Point Reyes. The exact location remains debated, claimed Nova Albion for England, and sailed away. Neither Spain nor England followed up with settlement. California remained overwhelmingly indigenous country while European diseases, weapons, and colonization devastated the rest of the Americas. But Spain's neglect couldn't last. In the 1760s, rumors reached Mexico City that Russian fur traders were pushing south from Alaska, establishing outposts and claiming territory. Simultaneously, the British were probing the Pacific coast. Spain's entire northern frontier and the lucrative silver mines of Zacatecas were suddenly vulnerable. The Sacred Expedition of 1769 changed everything. Spurred by José de Galvez, the Inspector General of New Spain, Spain launched a coordinated land and sea expedition to colonize Alta California. Military commander Gaspar de Portela and Franciscan priest Junipero Serra led the effort, establishing a presidio and mission at San Diego. On July 16, 1769, the first permanent European settlement in California. Over the next 53 years, Spain established a chain of 21 Franciscan missions, stretching from San Diego to Sonoma, each a day's journey apart, connected by El Camino Real, the Royal Road. For Presidio San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and San Francisco provided military protection. Tres Puebla San Jose Los Angeles and Branciforte were civilian settlements meant to supply the missions. The mission system was both spiritual enterprise and economic exploitation. Franciscan priests sought to convert indigenous peoples to Catholicism while training them in European agriculture, crafts, and language, the theory being that Indians would become Christian, Spanish-speaking subjects of the crown. The reality was darker. Once indigenous people accepted baptism and became neophytes, they were forbidden to leave mission grounds. Those who fled were hunted down by soldiers and returned in chains. Families were separated. Men and unmarried women slept in segregated dormitories locked at night. Traditional religious practices were banned and punished with whipping. European diseases, measles, smallpox, syphilis, dysentery tore through mission populations with apocalyptic fury. At Mission Dolores in San Francisco, deaths outnumbered births every single year of its existence. Between 1769 and 1821, California's indigenous population crashed from approximately 300,000 to perhaps 200,000, with mission Indians suffering the worst mortality. Yet Father Junipero Serra, who personally founded 9 missions and oversaw the system until his death in 1784, is remembered differently by different communities. The Catholic Church canonized him in 2015 as a saint who brought Christianity and civilization. Many indigenous Californians see him as the architect of genocide, a man whose missions were concentration camps where their ancestors died in shocking numbers. The truth resists simplification. Serra genuinely believed he was saving souls, yet his letters revealed he requested and received permission to use corporal punishment, and he demanded soldiers hunt down runaways. The missions produced wine, wheat, and livestock while destroying cultures. They taught European trades while obliterating indigenous knowledge systems. They baptized thousands while burying tens of thousands. In 1849, approximately 90,000 people, the 49ers, poured into California by every route imaginable. Some sailed around Cape Horn, a 6-month voyage through some of the world's most dangerous waters. Others crossed the fever-ridden Isthmus of Panama where cholera and malaria killed thousands. Most braved overland trails, enduring cholera epidemics, starvation, dehydration, and attacks by indigenous peoples defending their territories. They came from every American state, from Europe, from Latin America, from China. Global stampede. San Francisco exploded from a settlement of 200 to a city of 25,000 in 2 years. A chaotic boomtown of tents, wooden shanties, saloons, brothels, and gambling halls where a glass of whiskey cost $1 equivalent to about $35 today, and eggs sold for $1 each. The mythology of the gold rush centers on lone miners striking it rich. The reality was different and darker. Most miners found only backbreaking labor, panning and sluicing for 12 hours a day in icy streams, living on beans and salt pork, sleeping in tents or crude cabins, for returns that barely covered expenses. A few made fortunes from lucky strikes, but most either went broke or earned modest wages. The real fortunes were made by entrepreneurs like Samuel Brannan, who bought up mining equipment then spread word of the gold discovery while marking up prices 500%. Levi Strauss arrived in San Francisco in 1853, initially selling canvas for tents, then pivoting to durable work pants, denim jeans, that became the uniform of working men worldwide. Hydraulic mining devastated landscapes. Miners blasted entire hillsides with high-pressure water cannons, washing away millions of tons of soil and rock to reach gold-bearing gravel. The sediment choked rivers, buried farmland downstream, and poisoned ecosystems. Mercury, used to amalgamate gold from crushed or contaminated waterways. Mercury levels remain dangerously high in California rivers and streams today, over 170 years later. The gold rush was also genocidal. California's indigenous population, approximately 150,000 in 1848, plummeted to 30,000 by 1860. Miners murdered Indians with impunity. Accounts describe miners amusing themselves by hunting Indians for sport. The California state government admitted to the Union in 1850 as a free state opposing slavery because miners didn't want to compete with slave labor. Funded militia campaigns specifically to exterminate Indians. Between 1850 and 1859, the state spent $1.5 million on such campaigns. The 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians legalized the kidnapping of indigenous children and their indentures. In 1911, a man named Ishi, the last of the Yahi, emerged from the wilderness, the last survivor of his people. California's political organization happened at breakneck speed. In September 1849, delegates met in Monterey to draft a state constitution. They prohibited slavery, established relatively liberal voting requirements white males over 21, and defined California's borders. California applied for statehood immediately, bypassing the usual territorial period. As part of the Compromise of 1850, a desperate attempt to prevent civil war over slavery, California was admitted as a free state on September 9, 1850, tipping the balance of power in the Senate and accelerating the nation toward the conflict that would erupt 11 years later. The gold rush transformed California from remote frontier to economic and cultural powerhouse almost overnight. By 1860, California's population exceeded 380,000. San Francisco became the financial and cultural capital of the West, with banks, theaters, newspapers, and mansions rivaling anything in New York or Boston. Sacramento, at the confluence of the American and Sacramento rivers, became the state capital in 1854. Agriculture boomed. California's Central Valley and coastal valleys proved extraordinarily fertile, capable of growing everything from wheat to grapes to citrus. Wheat farming exploded, and by the 1880s, California was America's leading wheat producer. But California remained isolated. Reaching the East Coast required months by ship around Cape Horn or weeks crossing Panama's jungles. The solution was the Transcontinental Railroad. In 1862, Congress passed the Pacific Railroad Act, authorizing construction of a railroad connecting California to the Eastern Rail Network. The Central Pacific Railroad, built eastward from Sacramento, was controlled by the Big Four: Leland Stanford, Collis Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker, Sacramento merchants who became robber barons. Construction began in 1863. The Central Pacific faced an engineering nightmare crossing the Sierra Nevada, a granite mountain range with peaks over 14,000 feet. The Big Four hired thousands of Chinese laborers who performed superhuman feats, blasting 15 tunnels through solid granite using black powder and, later, nitroglycerin. Winter work meant tunneling under snowpack 40 feet deep. Avalanches buried workers alive. Explosions killed dozens. Exact death tolls are unknown because the Central Pacific kept poor records and didn't value Chinese lives, but estimates range from 1,200 to over 2,000 Chinese workers killed during construction. They worked for less pay than white laborers, did the most dangerous jobs, and received little recognition. Yet they persisted, driving the railroad east across Nevada and into Utah. On May 10, 1869, at Promontory Summit, Utah, the Central Pacific met the Union Pacific, which had built west from Omaha. Leland Stanford drove a ceremonial golden spike, symbolically completing the Transcontinental Railroad. Telegraphs sent word instantly, done. The journey from New York to San Francisco, which once took 6 months by ship or wagon, now took 6 days by train. The railroad brought more settlers, more goods, and accelerated development. It also concentrated immense wealth and political power in the hands of the Big Four and their Southern Pacific Railroad monopoly. They controlled not just transportation but California's economy and politics, bribing legislators, manipulating freight rates to crush competitors, and accumulating land grants that eventually totaled 11% of California's entire land area. Farmers and merchants who depended on the railroad but resented its exorbitant rates and political corruption formed the Granger movement, demanding regulation. The 1879 California Constitution created the Railroad Commission to regulate rates, though enforcement remained weak for decades. The railroad also enabled more intensive anti-Chinese persecution. White workers, facing economic competition and inflamed by racist demagogues, blamed Chinese immigrants for low wages. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, America's first major immigration restriction law, banned Chinese immigration for 10 years, later extended repeatedly and not fully repealed until 1943. Chinese residents faced boycotts, arson, and expulsion. The 1885 to 1886 Pacific Coast anti-Chinese riots saw white mobs drive Chinese residents from dozens of towns across California, Washington, and Oregon. Yet Chinese Californians fought back through litigation, diplomatic pressure from the Chinese government, and community solidarity, maintaining their presence despite legal exclusion. Southern California's transformation began with the railroad's arrival in Los Angeles in 1876. Real estate booms followed. Developers marketed Southern California as a Mediterranean paradise, endless sunshine, orange groves, beaches, to Midwestern farmers freezing through harsh winters. But Southern California faced a fundamental problem: no water. Los Angeles, originally a modest pueblo, averaged only 15 inches of rain annually, barely enough to sustain its small population. William Mulholland, a self-taught engineer who became superintendent of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, solved the problem through audacity and deception. He identified the Owens Valley, on the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada 230 miles north, as Los Angeles's future water source. Through subterfuges, posing as ranchers and farmers bought up Owens Valley land and water rights while concealing that Los Angeles was behind the purchases. Mulholland assembled the rights to build an aqueduct. Construction began in 1908. The Los Angeles Aqueduct, completed in 1913, was an engineering marvel. 233 miles of canals, tunnels, and pipelines bringing Owens River water to Los Angeles by gravity alone, crossing the Mojave Desert and dropping 2,000 feet. When water first arrived on November 5, 1913, Mulholland's dedication speech was brief. There it is. Take it. Los Angeles did, growing from 100,000 people in 1900 to over 1 million by 1930. But Owens Valley died. Farmers and ranchers, their water diverted, watched wells run dry and farms turn to dust. Some fought back, dynamiting the aqueduct repeatedly in the 1920s. Mulholland's response was more security and more water diversions. The Owens Valley Water Wars revealed California's brutal resource politics and set precedents for water conflicts that continue today. Los Angeles's growth was also fueled by oil. Discoveries at Los Angeles City Oilfield 1892, Huntington Beach 1920, Signal Hill 1921, and dozens of other fields transformed Los Angeles into an oil boomtown. Derricks rose in residential neighborhoods, on farms, even on beaches. The 1920s oil boom created instant millionaires and financed Los Angeles's explosive growth. Meanwhile, Hollywood emerged as the global entertainment capital. The movie industry relocated from New York to Southern California. After 1910, drawn by year-round sunshine for outdoor filming diverse landscapes within short distances, and distance from Thomas Edison's patent enforcers, Edison claimed broad patents on film equipment and sued independent filmmakers relentlessly. California's distance and corrupt local courts made enforcement difficult. By 1920, over 80% of the world's films were made in Hollywood. The star system emerged: Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, the first modern celebrities, whose faces were recognized worldwide. Hollywood exported American culture, values, and fantasies globally, making California synonymous with glamour, wealth, and possibility. Northern California developed differently. San Francisco rebuilt after the catastrophic 1906 earthquake and fire that destroyed 80% of the city and killed over 3,000 people. The disaster revealed corruption. City supervisors had accepted bribes from utilities, contributing to inadequate water systems, but also demonstrated resilience. By 1915, San Francisco hosted the Panama Pacific International Exposition, showcasing the city's resurrection with architecture and exhibits that dazzled millions of visitors. The early 20th century also brought progressive-era reforms and labor struggles. California's agricultural industry, producing everything from wheat to fruit to vegetables, depended on seasonal migrant labor. Filipino, Mexican, Japanese, and Indian workers harvested crops under brutal conditions for starvation wages. Labor organizing met violent resistance from growers who formed the Associated Farmers, an organization that used blacklists, violence, and red baiting to crush strikes. The 1913 Whitland riot, sparked by terrible conditions at a hop-picking camp, resulted in 4 deaths and led to reforms, but conditions remained harsh. The 1934 San Francisco general strike, triggered by longshoremen demanding union recognition and better conditions, paralyzed the city for 4 days. Police killed 2 strikers on Bloody Thursday, but the strike succeeded, forcing recognition of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union and inspiring labor organizing across California. World War I brought military bases, shipyards, and industrial expansion. California's population passed 3 million. Then came the Roaring Twenties prohibition, which Californians largely ignored. With speakeasies and bootleggers thriving, the oil boom, real estate speculation, and cultural flowering. But the party ended on October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, when the stock market collapsed, triggering the Great Depression. California suffered mass unemployment, bank failures, and agricultural collapse. Then came the Dust Bowl refugees. Between 1935 and 1940, approximately 400,000 migrants from Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri, the Okies, fled drought and economic devastation for California's promised land. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939, immortalized their desperate journey and brutal reception. Californians treated Okies as inferior whites, unwanted invaders competing for scarce jobs. Agricultural employers exploited their desperation, paying starvation wages. Labor camps were squalid, disease spread, yet the Okies persisted, eventually becoming part of California's working class. The Great Depression also brought ambitious public works. The Golden Gate Bridge, completed in 1937 after 4 years of construction, instantly became San Francisco's iconic suspension bridge, spanning the Golden Gate Strait with Art Deco towers, rising 746 feet above the water. 11 workers died during construction, despite revolutionary safety measures including a safety net that saved 19 men. The Halfway to Hell Club, the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, completed in 1936, connected the East Bay to San Francisco. These bridges, along with countless Depression-era schools, post offices, and roads built by New Deal programs, created infrastructure that enabled California's wartime and post-war boom. World War II transformed California more profoundly than even the gold rush. After Pearl Harbor, California became the arsenal of democracy. Shipyards in Richmond, Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco built warships at unprecedented rates. Richmond's Kaiser shipyards employed 90,000 workers at peak, launching a ship every 3 days. Aircraft factories Lockheed in Burbank, Douglas in Santa Monica, Consolidated in San Diego produced fighters and bombers round the clock. Women, including thousands of African American women, flooded into industrial jobs as Rosie the Riveters, proving women could perform heavy industrial work. The Second Great Migration brought African Americans from the South seeking defense jobs and escape from Jim Crow. Black populations exploded. Richmond's black population grew from 270 in 1942 over 10,000 by 1945. But migrants found California's racism different only in form. Racial covenants excluded black families from white neighborhoods. Schools were segregated. Job discrimination was rampant. The 1943 Zoot Suit riots in Los Angeles, white servicemen attacking Mexican-American youths wearing distinctive zoot suits, revealed racial tensions simmering beneath wartime unity. The war's darkest chapter was Japanese-American internment. After Pearl Harbor, anti-Japanese hysteria swept California. In February 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing military exclusion zones. Over 120,000 Japanese-American U.S. citizens were forced from homes, farms, and businesses and imprisoned in camps in California, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and Arkansas. They lost property worth billions in today's dollars. Families lived behind barbed wire and tar paper barracks and desert camps, subjected to guard towers, searchlights, and armed sentries. Many young Japanese-American men, despite their families' imprisonment, volunteered for military service. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team, composed almost entirely of Japanese Americans, became the most decorated unit in U.S. military history, suffering casualties approaching 300% as replacements. The internment was legal atrocity, racist hysteria codified into law. Not until 1988 did the federal government formally apologize and provide reparations. $20,000 per survivor, a pittance compared to losses. Post-war California boomed. Defense spending didn't end with Japan's surrender. The Cold War brought new military contracts. Hewlett-Packard, founded in a Palo Alto garage in 1939, pioneered the entrepreneurial model that would define Silicon Valley engineers leaving established companies to start their own, financed by venture capital, focusing on innovation over stability. The GI Bill enabled veterans to buy homes, fueling suburban sprawl. Developers carved orange groves and farmland into tract housing. Lakewood, Levittown-style developments in the San Fernando Valley, Orange County, and the East Bay. Freeways, funded by the 1956 interstate highway system, stitched together sprawling metropolitan regions. The Overton neighborhood in Los Angeles, the Fillmore district in San Francisco, thriving communities bulldozed for freeways. Growth had environmental costs. Smog, photochemical pollution from automobile exhaust choked Los Angeles and the Central Valley. Rachel Carson's 1962 Silent Spring and emerging environmental consciousness sparked activism. California led the nation in environmental regulation, establishing the Air Resources Board in 1967 and passing landmark clean air and water laws. The 1960s brought political and cultural revolution. The free speech movement at UC Berkeley in 1964, led by Mario Savio, challenged university restrictions on political activity, sparking student activism nationwide. The Summer of Love in 1967 made San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district the epicenter of counterculture hippies, psychedelic drugs, LSD, popularized by Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey, rock music, Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, sexual liberation, and anti-war protest. The Black Panther Party, founded in Oakland in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, advocated armed self-defense against police brutality and established community programs, free breakfast for children, health clinics, education while facing FBI infiltration and violent suppression. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta organized the United Farm Workers, leading strikes and grape boycotts that won recognition in better conditions for agricultural laborers. The 1965 to 1970 Delano grape strike and national boycott became a landmark victory for labor and Latino civil rights. California's politics shifted. Richard Nixon, California congressman and senator, became vice president 1953 to 1961 and later president 1969 to 1974, embodying anti-communist conservatism. Ronald Reagan, a Hollywood actor turned conservative spokesman, was elected California governor in 1966, defeating incumbent Pat Brown. Reagan's governorship featured confrontations with student protesters, including ordering National Guard troops onto UC Berkeley's campus during People's Park protests, anti-welfare rhetoric, and land order politics. Reagan's California tenure launched his presidential career, yet California remained politically unpredictable. Jerry Brown, Pat Brown's son, won the governorship in 1974, bringing environmental consciousness, labor-friendly policies, and opposition to the death penalty. Brown appointed the first women and minorities to California courts, including Rose Bird as California Supreme Court Chief Justice. The 1978 Proposition 13, a property tax limitation initiative, devastated California's public finances by capping property tax increases and requiring two-thirds legislative majorities for tax increases. Proposition 13 shifted California from having some of the nation's best-funded schools and infrastructure to among the worst. The effects persist today. The 1980s brought challenges. Deindustrialization hit aerospace and manufacturing. The 1992 Los Angeles riots, sparked by the acquittal of 4 LAPD officers who brutally beat Rodney King, captured on video, killed 63 people, injured thousands, and caused over $1 billion in damage. The riots exposed persistent inequality, police brutality, and racial injustice, revealing that California's prosperity wasn't shared equally. Yet California's economy transformed and thrived. Silicon Valley exploded with the personal computer revolution. Apple, founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in 1976, made computers accessible to individuals. Microsoft, though founded in Albuquerque and later relocated to Seattle, maintained extensive California operations. The Internet, developed from Defense Department ARPANET research, went commercial in the 1990s. The dot-com boom created unprecedented wealth. Stanford dropouts founded companies Yahoo, Google that became worth billions. The 2000 dot-com crash wiped out paper fortunes but didn't stop innovation. Google, founded in 1998, survived and dominated search. Facebook, founded at Harvard but relocated to Palo Alto, redefined social interaction. Apple's iPhone, introduced in 2007, put powerful computers in billions of pockets worldwide. California wine country, especially Napa and Sonoma, achieved international recognition after the 1976 Judgment of Paris, when California wines defeated French wines in blind tastings, shocking the wine world and establishing California as a premier wine region. The 21st century brought new crises. The 2000-2001 California electricity crisis, caused by deregulation and market manipulation by companies like Enron, resulted in rolling blackouts and billions in losses. The 2008 financial crisis, fueled partly by California's housing bubble, devastated the state. Foreclosures multiplied. The state budget imploded, yet California recovered. Tech boomed against smartphones, social media, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. California became the world's 5th largest economy, larger than the United Kingdom, India, or France. Climate change manifested in catastrophic wildfires. The 2017 Tubbs fire killed 22 and destroyed 5,636 structures. The 2018 Camp Fire killed 85 people and destroyed the town of Paradise, becoming California's deadliest wildfire. The 2020 August complex became California's largest fire ever, burning over 1 million acres. Each fire season breaks records. Drought, exacerbated by climate change and over-extraction of groundwater, threatens water supplies. The Colorado River, which provides water to Southern California, is drying up. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at historically low levels. Homelessness, driven by astronomical housing costs, inadequate mental health services, and addiction, created visible crisis in every major city. California has the nation's largest homeless population, over 170,000 people, including tens of thousands of children. The COVID-19 pandemic hit California hard. Governor Gavin Newsom issued America's first statewide stay-at-home order on March 19, 2020, balancing public health against economic devastation. Essential workers, disproportionately Latino, kept a state running. Over 100,000 Californians died. Vaccines brought recovery, but economic and social scars remain. Today, California contains nearly 40 million people, 1 in 8 Americans. It's the nation's most diverse state. No racial or ethnic group holds a majority. Spanish is widely spoken. Asian Americans, Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, Indian, Korean, Japanese comprise 15% of the population. California leads in technology, entertainment, agriculture, and renewable energy. 5 of the world's 10 largest companies by market capitalization are headquartered in California. Yet California faces existential challenges: water scarcity in a warming climate, housing costs that force working families into homelessness, income inequality that rivals the Gilded Age, political polarization, and infrastructure decay. Wildfires grow worse. Earthquakes remain inevitable. The big one, a magnitude 7.8 or larger rupture of the San Andreas Fault, could kill thousands and cause hundreds of billions in damage. From indigenous paradise to Spanish missions to Mexican ranchos to gold rush chaos to agricultural empire to aerospace giant to technology capital, California has continually reinvented itself, always reaching for something bigger, bolder, more audacious. "13,000 years after the first humans arrived, California remains what it has always been: a land of extremes, a place where ambition collides with reality. The Golden State's saga continues, shaped by forces beyond any individual's control: climate change, technological disruption, demographic transformation, resource scarcity, and by millions whose daily struggles, innovations, and dreams determine not just California's future but the world's, because California, for better and worse, has always been a preview of what comes next.